Good morning, welcome to Headline Focus here live on Core Politics with me, Rob Double. It is Tuesday the 8th of May 2018. Let's have a look at the political headlines today. So to start off with, Boris Johnson, the Foreign Secretary, has lashed out in a rather unprecedented public dispute over the customs union, very much making his opinions and his points known, starkly different to those of the Prime Minister, Theresa May. In fact, he's described Number 10's proposals and Theresa May's preferred option for a post-Brexit customs arrangement with the EU as crazy. Now, this whole idea is around a customs partnership. It's really being pushed by the Prime Minister, which will involve the UK collecting import tariffs for the EU when they're coming into the UK and then reimbursing companies where the goods are staying in the UK, they're not moving on to the EU. So it's a very, very complicated system, and rather it will involve the UK having to take the burden of a lot of the bureaucratic responsibility. And indeed, that's where Boris Johnson really has a problem. It's in the Daily Mail today that these reports come through in the front page, as you can see there. It would limit the UK's ability to do post-Brexit trade deals, first off, and secondly, it will create a whole new web of bureaucracy by having to work out where these tariffs are going, what needs to be refunded and what doesn't, and what needs to be transferred over to Brussels. Now, the big quote is, if you have a new customs partnership, you have a crazy system whereby you end up collecting tariffs on behalf of the EU at the UK frontier. So really, really very strong, cannot happen, rather he does not think can happen or is feasible. Now, what does that mean? Well, first off, he's joining the Brexiteers, or there's a very strong movement from Brexit voting cabinet members for a maximum facilitation customs arrangement, which is basically the second option available to cabinet, whereby there'd be trusted traders, particularly on the Irish border, and these trusted traders through pre-registration would be able to have pretty seamless transition between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, which is obviously where the EU-UK land border is going to be. But the second point is, can he actually remain in cabinet if the Prime Minister does force through her idea of what the customs partnership should be? If there comes to a customs partnership, and Boris Johnson has made it very clear that he does not agree with it in a post-Brexit Britain, can he stay as Foreign Secretary? That's the real rumblings going on as a result of this story, and interesting to see where it goes in the next couple of days. Next up, Brexit is back in the Lords. In fact, on its final day of report stage in the Lords. There's two further real possible defeats for the government going through today in the form of the amendments. The first is an amendment to ensure that Britain can remain part of the EU if it so wishes, or EU agencies, sorry, if it so wishes. And the second is to kill off the government plan to write in the exact date and the exact time into Brexit, into law. So basically saying we will leave on this date no matter what, it's in law, it's happening, rather than making it a little bit more fluid and perhaps a little bit more change. There is a further one which some people will probably be having a lot of noise about, and that's to do with an amendment on the cross-party bid to keep Britain in the EEA, the European Economic Area. Now, that's cross-party, so it's got support from across all parties. However, it's unlikely to go through, and that's mainly because Labour is whipping its peers to vote against it. A real story there will be how many Labour peers decide to vote against their party leadership's whip and vote for a bid to keep Britain in the EEA. That will be something which comes out later today, so keep your eyes out on that. And finally, one more story, which is in the Guardian front page, is that everyone in Britain should receive £10,000 when they turn 25. Now, this is according to a report by the Resolution Foundation, which is a big prominent think tank, particularly dealing with social mobility and social issues. This would help fix, reportedly, the broken intergenerational contract between millennials and baby boomers. Baby boomers are, of course, those from decades before who enjoyed, or at least reportedly enjoyed, relative ease of getting a house and getting access to easy mortgages and stuff like this, and easy rent. Compared to now, millennials are people who are now in their 20s and 30s who are struggling to get onto the property ladder, for example, struggling to get good mortgages and struggling to get good deposits, particularly for housing. And for housing is the real focus of a lot of this as well. It's funded, this £10,000 for everyone, by changing the inheritance tax. So currently it's 40% above a threshold of £1 million in terms of when you get taxed on inheritance. The suggestion from the Resolution Foundation is that this is replaced with a new 20% tax on all gifts or inheritances throughout everyone's life for up to £500,000. And then after that, it will be 30% on all gifts or inheritances as well. How that would actually be managed and actually be enforced is another question. I think, how can you enforce every single gift or every single inheritance someone gets, particularly if they don't declare it, or it's a very casual arrangement between families or whatever. But the research indicates, and this is the real crux of it, that in 2001 people aged 25 to 34 consume the same as 54 to 64-year-olds. However, today, which is obviously over a decade later, in fact around about 17 years later, people aged 25 to 34 consume 15% less than those of the 15 to 64 age bracket, indicating that people who are 25 to 34 are consuming less because they are less able to consume because of the break-in social intergenerational contract between millennials and baby boomers. But that's just an interesting report. Have a look at The Guardian if you're interested in reading more. That's pretty much it for today. You're up to date. Don't forget you can find all the latest on what we're doing here on Core Politics on our Facebook page and on Twitter right here. But from me and all the team here at Core London, have a fantastic start to your Tuesday.